you are in charge of the program manager of business engagement at the CBD, and for the United Nations Convention on Biodiversity, and you coordinate the Global Partnership for Business and Biodiversity, and you lead a lot of discussion I'm fond of with the private sector. Thank you, and please, Bianca.
Thank you very much, Claude.
Yeah.
Hello, thank you to you, and thank you to the GIZ team for partnering with us and for making this happen. Thank you for everyone who's joined us today for this discussion. As most of you know, in 2021, 196 parties will discuss and adopt the new Global Agreement for Biodiversity on the Planet, what we call the Post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. This global agreement will pave the way for the next decade and beyond, and will provide for an opportunity for government, civil society, and the business community at large to work together to reverse the loss of biodiversity that can threaten our very own existence. The Secretariat of the Convention has been working alongside the business community and partners to promote a more sustainable and biodiversity-friendly economy. Since 2011, as Claude just mentioned, we have been coordinating the Global Partnership for Business and Biodiversity. It is a growing network of networks comprised by national and regional business and biodiversity initiatives that have been representing over 60 countries worldwide and are connected in turn to thousands of business of all sizes and sectors in different parts of the world. The main role of the Global Partnership is to share information, tools, mechanisms, case studies, and above all, as we adopt the Global Biodiversity Framework, we'll be supporting countries and other organizations on the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. As the name tells, the partnership only functions well if it's supported by collaboration with relevant players and partners. And this is exactly the conversion point that led us to partner with GIZ to bring this webinar to life. In the months leading up to COP, the Global Partnership and the Secretariat will be organizing a series of virtual events. We have already organized a few in the past months, but we plan on organizing many more in the months to come. We're with a view to promote emerging tools, mechanisms that can actually help concrete implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. We hope these tools are very useful for you guys today. The ones that were developed by GIZ have been implemented, pilot tested with very successful results. And we are very, very glad to have the opportunity to partner with them to showcase these examples. And we hope that you can, make use of them moving forward. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope the discussion is very fruitful and you find the discussion very useful. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Bianca, and again, thanks to GIZ to organize that. Now we will go into the first part of our session because time is important, where we will hear about tools for mainstreaming biodiversity, as I said. Those tools include the Biodiversity Check, Biodiversity Action Plan, short BAP, and the BAP monitoring tool. Then for this, I am very happy and excited to present to you our three speakers. We will tell us more about those tools and their experiences with them. And the first one is we will welcome Swenja Polino, who is the director of Business and Biodiversity Program in Central America and Dominican Republic at the GIZ. And this program has been working since 2014 in the mainstreaming of biodiversity into private sector, offering, I'm sure, tools that helps companies analyze their dependencies and the impact of biodiversity and promoting a change of mindset in which biodiversity and ecosystem services are considered strategic partners for business development. Then she will tell us about the tool Biodiversity Check, and afterward, we will welcome Simona D'Amico and Tobias Lutz. Simona works for UEBT as biodiversity expert, and UEBT, as you know, has the ambition to promote 100 BAP by 2024 with its member companies working in the cosmetic, pharmaceutical, and food industry. And Tobias, for him, is a program manager at Global Nature Fund and implemented Biodiversity Action Plan on the 3 continents over the last 3 years. They will both tell us more about Biodiversity Action Plan and the BAP monitoring tool. So, Swenja Polino, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for this very good introduction to our program, which is what we really did is working on a paradigm shift over the last years within and together with the private sector here in the region. And thanks also for giving us the opportunity to share our experience with the biodiversity check agriculture. But again, let me first of all give you a little background about our program. The name of the program is, as you said, Business and Biodiversity in Central America and Dominican Republic. Maybe Mauricio, you go exactly there. And is implemented on behalf of the German Ministry for Development Cooperation and the European Union. So we also work together with 2 different donors here. Our political counterpart is the Central American Integration System, SICA, which is based in El Salvador, who delegated the implementation to the Central American Commission for Environment and Development, the CCAD. So we are a regional program, and we work in 5 different countries, which are Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Honduras. This was in the very first years. These were in the very first years our pilot countries. And now, since last year, we started the 2nd phase of the program. And we are very happy that we still have about 4 years to go with the program. And we are adding now 2 new countries to our work, which are Guatemala and El Salvador. And as you said already, we started already some years ago in 2014, and with the objective to engage the private sector in the sustainable use and conservation of biodiversity. And the main sectors we are working with are the agricultural sector, but we also work in tourism. Lately, we have added other sectors like the industrial sector, the service sector. So we have a variety of sectors we are working with. In agriculture, what we first did when we started our program several years ago, together with actors from Costa Rica, we developed a biodiversity production model for the pineapple sector. This was also the first sector we were working with one of the most important farms in Costa Rica. We partnered with a local NGO. The name is Fundecor, and several experts, and together with this NGO and these experts, we developed this production model. And what is very important about this production model for us was this division of the criteria we developed in 3 different levels. So you see here the production level. So we have a set of criteria for the production level. We have another set of criteria for the level of the farm, which includes also not only the crop, but also the processing facility, other crops, as well as areas which are not used for production. And then the 3rd level for me is actually the most important level, because we are not only working with this landscape level on the property of the farm, but we also engage the private sector to include activities beyond the limits of their farms, implementing a landscape approach, including ecosystems which go far beyond the property of the farm. With this concept, we then approached a very important farm in Costa Rica. So we go to the next slide, Mauricio. So we teamed up with this farm. The name is Opala Agricola. And together with Opala Agricola in 2015 already, we developed with these criteria the very first biodiversity action plan, including activity on the 3 levels I just mentioned. And since then, we have a very strong partnership with Opala Agricola until today, and we have been updating the plan every year and monitor the results every year. For example, on the landscape levels, you can see the screenshot here. Opala Agricola designed a connectivity plan and has been reforesting several kilometers of biological corridor connecting towards the National Biocorridor in Costa Rica, Ruta de los Malecos. So after we had developed this biodiversity action plan, we thought, how can we replicate this model and achieve to integrate more farms in implementing biodiversity measures? And we thought that we need to define a process for the implementation of this biodiversity-friendly production model. And we developed this process, so we go to the next slide, and started also a training program at the same time for consultants and institutions to anchor this approach into the different relevant institutions in the region. And this is when we first started to talk about a biodiversity check, not anymore only about how do we organize a plan, but also how do we do the whole process? How do we check the farm and how do we develop the product? So this is here with this process that we first started talking about a biodiversity check. So we developed 7 steps. The first step assures good preparation of the biodiversity check. The consultant has to do an analysis of the farm and its surroundings. So from the very beginning, have this landscape approach in mind. The second step, the consultant visits the farm and agrees with the farm on the process and asks for further information. In the third step, the consultant prepares the main visit with all the information gathered on the farm. In the fourth step, then the consultant applies a checklist of the biodiversity check, which is connected to the criteria, which we developed in the production model. Then the fifth step is a preparation of the report. In the sixth step, which is a very important step again, is a step where we present the report and its recommendations. And together with the farm, we agree on a biodiversity action plan. It's not that there is a given plan, but from all the recommendations we present, the managers or the management of the farm itself selects the activities and measures which they want to implement. And the seventh step, obviously, is then the implementation of the biodiversity action plan. So what is our biodiversity check? Maybe some characteristics. It's not at all a certification. What we, with this process, what we offer is something like a structured dialogue, a guidance and orientation for the expert or the consultant who visits the farm. The dialogue also leads to a kind of sensibilization process. It's a mean also to determine the direct and indirect impacts and linkages of a company with biodiversity. And it is voluntary and flexible. This is also very important. So although we have all the criteria, with all this preparation you do until you arrive at the finca, you only ask what you think is relevant for the finca, but you don't have like 150 questions to ask. It has to have you have to develop a smooth dialogue together with the management of the farm. And it can be applied in different industries and of the agricultural sector, banana, pineapple, sugarcane, avocado, only to name some of them. So then we had this model, we had our biodiversity check, but before we started with the implementation on a larger scale, we said that we needed a validation process, and we asked an actor a new actor actually who hasn't been working together with us to validate our tool, and we hired the Sustainable Agricultural Network SUN to validate the tool and to pilot the biodiversity check in 3 different countries. And SUN, the Sustainable Agricultural Network, also helped us in defining result areas for the different implementation levels. This is what you can see here on this slide. We defined, like, I call it result areas, 18 result areas for the biodiversity check. For example, for the production area, we talk about efficient use of water or soil conservation. For the farm level, we talk about ecosystems conserved or infrastructure for biodiversity. On landscape level, we talk, for example, about partnerships. So this helped also the implementer of the biodiversity check to have a better structure for the implementation of the biodiversity check. So we go to the next slides. Here we have some benefits for the companies to implement the biodiversity check. Only to name some, it sensitizes about the importance of ecosystem services. It facilitates the integration and mainstreaming of biodiversity in the management of the company. It helps to improve the resilience of the productive activity and its environment against climate change. It detects business opportunities related to the topics of biodiversity to integrate the aspect also in marketing and communication strategies. It prepares company management for sustainability certifications that require biodiversity management. And obviously, it benefits biodiversity itself, ecosystems, endangered species, and so on. Now we go to the last slide, Mauricio. Also to name you, to give you some numbers, together with, in cooperation also with some other projects which are now working in the region. We have another program which is called From Farm to Fork. We partnered up with them for the implementation of the biodiversity check. From Farm to Fork is also initiative of the environmental ministry in Germany, of the ICI initiative, and together with them until today we implemented the biodiversity check agriculture in 121 farms here in the region covering more than 25,000 hectares of production. We have been implementing the tool in 3 different countries: Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, and Guatemala. We adjusted the biodiversity check and implemented it also in 5 different sectors: banana, pineapple, abaca, macadamia, and sugarcane. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Super. Thank you very much, Swenga. I have to say I'm particularly happy that the meeting starts with agriculture, with landscape, with farms. And at the same time, you mentioned dialogue, and I think it's particularly interesting to put emphasis on that dimension of your project. Thank you very much. Now, please, Simona and Tobias, the floor is yours.
Okay. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Good evening. I think I will start, and then Tobias will follow me. I hope you can hear me, and yeah, I would ask to start with the slide presentation. Thank you. So indeed, as mentioned, we are going to talk about the Biodiversity Action Plan and the Biodiversity Monitoring Tool. But before going to that, please allow me a few seconds to introduce a bit how everything started. So the collaboration between Union for Ethical Biotrade, where I work, the GIZ and GNF started indeed in the frame of the Private Business Action for Biodiversity project. And so the 3 organizations joined forces to define a biodiversity action plan and apply them in the Indian context and specifically in the spice sector. So we started working together on pepper, cardamom, and other key spices. And the result of this collaboration was the development of 2 manuals to guide the definition of biodiversity action plan in the spice sector, and some pilot implementation also of the biodiversity action plan, and also some pilot use of the biodiversity monitoring tool with farmers and processing companies, and also, of course, the development of those tools that I have mentioned. Next slide, please. Today, those are some numbers or some of the results that we have reached. So we have several organizations that have adopted or are promoting the biodiversity action plan approach. In India, for instance, the National Sustainable Spice Program and the Good Agricultural Practices by the Indian government. As UEBT, we are a standard organization. We also promote the use of the biodiversity action plan among our members. So far, we have biodiversity action plan defined over more than 10 countries and with more than 5 different ingredients from biodiversity. And GNF is involved in the Association Food for Biodiversity, where 13 members committed to the implementation of Biodiversity Action Plan. So with this said, what is the Biodiversity Action Plan? So we can go to the next slide, please. Where basically the biodiversity action planning can be defined as a strategic framework, so a set of tools and also some steps that allow farmers, but also companies and other actors at different stages of the supply chain to define context-specific measures for biodiversity conservation and sustainable use. So both in the field where plants are cultivated or collected and in the surrounding. And the idea is indeed to define those actions based on what are the needs of biodiversity in that specific context. At the same time, the Biodiversity Action Plan gives a structure to systematize the implementation of different actions. So even if implemented in different places, through the Biodiversity Action Plan approach, is it possible to develop them in parallel and especially toward the reaching of shared goals. The Biodiversity Action Plan approach also allows for monitoring and showing progress in the implementation of those actions toward some shared target. And also this approach follows an adaptive management. So in looking at the result of the monitoring, the action can be adjusted to improve the positive effect for biodiversity. Last but not least, the way the Biodiversity Action Plan is structured considers so many aspects of biodiversity that allow all those actors using this approach to be almost sure that several of the requirements of sustainability standards that look into biodiversity are covered. So if we go to the next slide, please, we have some 5 key steps to define and implement a biodiversity action plan. The first one is what we call the baseline assessment. That is where we look at what are the key aspects of biodiversity in a given context, what are the threats and the opportunities. The second step is about setting goals and targets, and basically we want to set measurable goals where we want to go and to overcome the threats that we have identified and to enhance the opportunities. Third, there is the step of defining measures. So identified all those actions that will contribute to reach those targets. And finally, and then the fourth step, define a work plan, which defines responsibility and timeline for the implementation of those actions. And finally, the fifth step is about the monitoring system. So define some indicators and some method to monitor indeed the progress toward the target, and this is where Tobias will indeed introduce us to the monitoring tool that is part of the Biodiversity Action Plan approach. And I think with that, I can give already the floor to Tobias, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, please, Tobias.
Thank you, Simona, and thanks to all of you for having us and being with us. Now, the Biodiversity Action Plan, regardless where it is applied, in which frame it is applied, well, it comes along with a certain set of tools. And we're going to introduce one of them, and please go ahead to the next slide. While you just click through it, there's another few points. Yes, thank you. There are tools that come with the Biodiversity Action Plan which are online based, but there are also tools that come along as something to be adaptable to local circumstances. In this case, we talk about the Biodiversity Action Plan Monitor, and this is an Excel tool that was developed and created to be easy to handle, to provide examples for biodiversity measures, to give ideas for biodiversity monitoring. Please click a few more times. You're going to see that there's a lot of points dropping out. The tool itself, it was created in a user-friendly way. It was created to be attractive, to use as much graphics as possible. And one of the main reasons why it works for a monitoring approach, it is that it uses a simple scoring system. And please go on to the next slides. It can be used, and here is one of the major points of the tools. It can, of course, be used in context with the biodiversity action plans. Now, that is where it comes from. But for companies that are, for some reasons, not implementing biodiversity action plans, still, they could use this application to monitor their biodiversity management approaches. Please go on. But why do we say a hands-on monitoring tool? Now, the monitoring itself, it is based on two pillars, on two levels. Now, this tool, it combines a first level monitoring, which is focusing on the progress of the implementation of biodiversity measures. And this progress and this implementation, it can be applied to farm level, but it can also be applied on landscape level. You can assess it with just one farm, or you may assess it with 100 supplying farms. And it is all about what percentage of the biodiversity measures to which I agreed upon have already been implemented. This is measured in 20, 40, 60, 80%, so in percentage steps, and it just gives an improvement over time. Now, this improvement is important as companies can communicate it. The second level of this approach is to talk about the impact of the biodiversity measures that we had. Now, impact is a tricky thing, but you can make it easy. You can look on indicators that create potential for biodiversity, and this is the main part of this tool. So we look at indicators like habitats, like ecological structures, on certain aspects of those indicators that create potential to increase biodiversity. But we also look on specific species counting, so species development. Please go on. That was one. Yes, that's an example of the indicators that I just mentioned. The tool shows a lot of indicators. And the fun is that the farmer or the company applying the tool can select whether he would like to work on soil, maybe he's keen on water aspects, maybe he's into ecological structures. So he just chooses what he's in favor of. And then there comes a drop down saying, okay, now let's have a look at, for example, particular organic matter. We're going to work with that indicator, and this indicator, if it increases the likelihood of soil organism to actually live and multiply in the soil. Same is with toxicity in water. If we reduce it, we create potential for biodiversity to thrive. Please, once more. This is, as I said, the fun part of all of it. It is a simple Excel application. It's an Excel tool. And because it is that simple and adaptable to all circumstances, to all companies, we are having it implemented all over the world in different situations, to different crops. And also you can implement it, regardless whether you are a company, a standard. You may ask for it, we're going to send it, you apply it, you adapt it to your needs, and then you're going to have it. And it is therefore now a good bridge to have a few examples of companies that actually implemented biodiversity action plans and which may work with the biodiversity action plan monitor in future. So I wish you lots of fun listening to those speakers and enjoy.
Thank you very much, Tobias, and for sure, Svenja and Simona too. And thank you for showing us so interesting tools. Now we are coming to the second part of the webinar experience, and we will show a success story with exactly the tools that we have just presented. Then I like to present to you, to be short and to go faster because of time, Hans Soter, who is the Senior Vice President of A&D, as well as the Chief Sustainability Officer at Fresh Del Monte Produce. And Hans, you seems to be a graduate work in entomology at UC Davis, specializing in biological control. Very fantastic. And you are devoted your lifetime to agricultural research, leading Fresh Del Monte constant innovation of the pineapple sector. And your role as first Chief Sustainability Officer of a business is so important. I will give you the floor. Please go on.
Thank you so much, Claude. And as Claude said, I'm first of all thankful to be invited to this important forum. I'm going to be talking about the application of the biodiversity check tool in our Costa Rican pineapple farms. Next, please. So first of all, a few words about Fresh Del Monte Produce. We're a global vertically integrated marketeer of fresh fruits and vegetables. And we have been the innovators of the pineapple category for the last 30 years, making it possible for per capita consumption of this important tropical fruit to grow threefold in that time span. We see ourselves as a fun, fresh, ethical, and sustainable company, and therefore elevated sustainability to a strategic goal back in 2019. And along that, we launched our first company-wide global greenhouse gas emissions inventory and committed to Science-Based Targets Initiative back in 2020. Rolling out a new fleet of fuel-efficient vessels last year. Next, please. So I'm here to talk about Pindeco, and that's the name we call our pineapple operation in Costa Rica. It's 9 farms, more or less 9,000 hectares, all of which have been certified by SCS as under the sustainably grown standard. 5 of them have already achieved carbon neutral certification, and we're working on the 4 other farms as we speak. This operation has been a pioneer in conservation for the last 30 years. It leveraged on well-defined land use guidelines in terms of and that way protected about 7,000 hectares of forest, biological corridors, and private reserves. Next, please. And so, because at Fresh Del Monte we believe that sustainability has to continually achieve higher levels, we connected with GIC 2 years ago, started looking at the biodiversity check to implement it in 2 of our farms. One of them, San Cayetano, which is in the humid lowland Caribbean slopes or plains in the northeastern Costa Rica, and the other one, Volcan Farm, in the more dry southwest Pacific Plateau. Both of these farms have significant conservation assets. San Cayetano, 1,200 hectares of conserved forest, and Volcan Farm around 500 hectares. And interestingly enough, both of them are close to national parks. So the opportunity for biodiversity to use some of these assets as refuges and for exchange of biodiversity between these conservation areas was present there from the first point. Next, please. So after applying the biodiversity check last year with GIC, a series of actions were determined, and this gap analysis that the biodiversity check is all about helped us reach an agreement and select certain activities which were really important to us. And despite the tremendous track record of this operation, we had never really talked to our employees and the community about our conservation efforts. So training come into account that these 2 farms have anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 workers. The impact of training in conservation and biodiversity in the community was enormous. GIC helped us roll out participatory species inventory with the community. They supported us in rolling out a course in nature guides where 20 young people prepared themselves for post-COVID recovery of the green tourism industry. And finally, truck drivers in respectfully driving and protecting local fauna. Next, please. With such huge conservation areas comes an enormous responsibility to protect them against fires, and constant training of new members and community members is of utmost importance. Next, please. And then another pillar of this program was actions that enhance conditions for biodiversity to prosper in our own farms. So we continue to establish biological corridors and plant species, tree species that bear food for wildlife. For the last 4 years, we have planted more than 1 million trees. But then this very simple idea of placing perch stands for bird of prey in those fields that were too large to have trees in the middle has been very positive to see already the results in the field. Next, please. Now, thanks to GIC, who donated 9 motion-sensitive cameras, we're now being able to track biodiversity in these conservation areas in a more efficient way, and have documented more than 17 species of mammals. We're now engaged in bird inventory, and most significantly, we're developing a tool that workers can use in their smartphones and have fun while they're working in the field, identifying some of the species they encounter. Next, please. So what are the lessons learned from this exciting experience? First of all, the tool itself helped us recognize the importance of biodiversity beyond the sequestration of carbon by our forests. We're paying now attention to the biodiversity and the ecosystem that are provided by these assets. The tool itself provided structure and helped us prioritize actions because resources are always limited. And I'm very happy to report that we found an overwhelming support from employees and the community. That took us totally by surprise. Biodiversity is such a powerful motivator that is helping us bring the different stakeholders together. That we didn't expect, and we're happy to see that employees themselves are the most excited partner in this project. We're still trying to fully understand the magnitude of ecosystem services provided by these reserves. So we're making a concerted effort to measure the contribution and best management. Next, please. Along the lines of what Zhenya was saying previously, it doesn't matter how much we do at the farm level. If we don't take into account the whole region, we're always going to be affected by what neighbors do. And we realized with the biodiversity check that we needed to take a landscape view to the issues that affect these operations, and in order to devise or design strategies, long-term strategies. And so this conversation with neighbors and community, we're being able to structure it more effectively, and definitely have a lot of work in front of us now. Next, please. Finally, this partnership with GIC brought credibility to our actions, not only with external stakeholders, but also with the employees themselves, because now they realize it was not just a marketing effort that we were doing, it was legitimate, our interest in these conservation assets and the culture we have been trying to foster in the last 30 years. So in summary, we're now much better prepared to communicate programs to consumers and customers. And with that, I hand the floor to our next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hans. I love very much the demonstration you do that makes an holistic approach, that make people at the center, people and the consciousness of people, that make a link between forest, countryside, landscape, cultivation, and it's absolutely fundamental if we want to mainstreaming things. Thank you very much to you. And now we will go to Louise Bédéby, who is a Sustainable Agriculture Project Manager of Cycles and Procurement at Danone. And she will tell us about the success story of Danone in implementing Biodiversity Action Plan in Mexico within the Madureira project. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot for having me in this webinar. I'm Louise Bédéby, so regional fruit buyer at Danone, and my experience has been in the management of sustainable agriculture project for Danone sourcing. And thanks to our collaboration with the GIZ, we implemented a strong biodiversity action plan in our project Madureira, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. So in the next slide, please. First, let me tell you a bit about what is the Madureira project. So up until a couple of years ago, our strawberry sourcing at Danone was very vulnerable. Strawberry is our consumers' #1 favorite fruit, and we purchase around $18 million worth of strawberry just in Mexico. And all of this strawberry was coming almost exclusively from the region of Zamora in Michoacán. And over there, well, the demand has been growing steadily over the years for this strawberry, but the offer has stagnated, making it hard to secure the volumes that we needed. And on the other hand, we have in Mexico a wealth of untapped potential. So 70% of farmers in Mexico are smallholder farmers farming less than 5 hectares of land. And in a lot of cases, they're not able to sell their produce to the formal market. And that's because they lack the agronomic, but also the business skills to connect to these markets. This is why we decided to connect these smallholder farmers with our sourcing. In the next slide, please. This is also in line with Danone's global commitment. So on the one hand, One Planet Business for Biodiversity commitment taken at the UN a couple of years ago. And on the right-hand side, the commitment towards regenerative agriculture, which has been at the core of our business for a few years with the 3 pillars that you see here in the slide. And in the Madureira project, we work on biodiversity and regenerative agriculture hand in hand. And that's why you'll hear me switch between these two concepts throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. So this is where Madureira ties all of this together. It's an inclusive agricultural model that strengthens smallholder farmer communities, offers agronomical and business training, and boosts regenerative agriculture and fruit. On the field, this means €2 million in funding, 700 farmers and farm workers trained in good agricultural practices, and 50% of Danone's strawberry needs for North America produced in a way that we're proud of. And it also means outside of the field, regenerative agriculture pilot for our fruit with a solid biodiversity action plan, and developed with a strong coalition of partners, including, of course, the GIZ, but also the Walmart Foundation and Grupo Altex, and the NGOs TechnoServe and Noop, and the Danone Ecosystem Fund. In the next slide, please. So to understand a bit what is regenerative agriculture, it is a farming system with soil building practices with fair contracts and the right fertilization at the right time, and water conservation practices. Essentially, it's a way of doing agriculture that helps build carbon soil. It has a lot of environmental and economic benefits for the producer. This is an important topic at Madureira because we're fully a part of the ecosystem. We both impact it. So, for example, the monarch butterfly migrates to the Michoacán region in the winters in Mexico and passes through our production zone, but we're also impacted by it. So bee pollination, as you know, is necessary for 1/3 of the food that we produce, and this is quite important for strawberry. In the next slide, please. On the other hand, conventional agriculture is a type of agriculture that optimizes yield and profit, but can be the cause of environmental degradation. In fact, strawberry is in the dirty dozen list of fruits with most pesticide residue after harvest. So this is why it's a key topic for this fruit. And conventional agriculture can be linked with loss of pollinizers, runoff of agrochemicals into the ground, and unhealthy working conditions for workers. In the next slide, please. So this is why biodiversity was crucial to address in Madureira, and we led this methodology thanks to the collaboration of the GIZ. So our methodology was to first, starting with an in-depth study of our producers' current practices and the state of their field. Then we prioritized the work ahead and the practices that we were going to implement. In the third step, we implemented the practices in the field. And finally, we are publishing biodiversity toolkits for farmers and fruit buyers. So now let me show you how. In the next slide, please. So as I was saying, the first step was to study the field practices and understand the conditions in the field. So we performed a baseline study on 16 farms. We learned a lot of very valuable insight from this research. Here are a few examples. The first one is that our farmers were using about 3 times as much water as is estimated that strawberries need. We also learned that a third of our farmers apply too much nitrogen, which can have environmental impact. But we also learned that half of our farmers were not applying enough nitrogen, so losing in efficiency. And what that really showed was that none of our farmers were really basing their decision on soil analysis before the beginning of the project. And a third example of something that we learned is that the average fertile soil layer in the farms, in the strawberry farms in Maravatío, where the project is 42 centimeters. So 42 centimeters of fertile soil. But farmers were tilling down to 60 centimeters on average. So mixing fertile ground with dry earth, essentially. In the next slide, please. So then, with the strength of this knowledge, we began the part of practice prioritization. So we trained the teams and prioritized the work that we had to do in 2 workshops. The first workshop was about understanding the different ecosystemic services impacting and depending on strawberry cultivation. So that means having all of our agronomists, project managers, etc., really understand how our project was being impacted by pollination, how we were impacting pollination and such for all of the services. And then in prioritizing practices with the most impact in our context. So this was something done with the Global Nature Fund, and it led to the identification of 33 practices that are beneficial for biodiversity and strawberry cultivation. These practices are now detailed in a manual for the attention of farmers that I'm going to tell you a bit more about in just a few minutes. In the next slide, please. So moving on to the third step, which is implementation. We implemented these practices in the field. So from here, we differentiated 2 types of practices from the ones that we had identified as important. The first type of identified practices are pretty easy practices, let's say, with an obvious return on investment for farmers that are safe to implement. So these ones, we directly trained our farmers in the implementation of these practices, and they're already putting them in practice since the beginning of the project. The second type of practices is more, let's say, experimental. So these are practices where the return on investment for farmers is not necessarily proven yet, and we weren't quite sure in the beginning whether or not they could have negative impact on the yields. So for these practices, we led experimental pilots to try them out and determine whether or not they should be taught to our farmers. Next slide, please. So to give you an example of 2 of such practices, for the ones that are pretty obvious, as I said, we learned in the baseline that our farmers were not using soil analyses to make their fertilization decisions, and therefore used too much or not enough of certain nutrients. So what we did is we went to the farmers and demonstrated to them that using fertilizers with the right information in the correct way, they would be able to decrease their costs and increase their yields. So these practices were directly adopted because farmers saw directly the benefit. And in terms of biodiversity, this had the benefit of protecting, the environment, the insects in the ground and above, such as the monarch butterfly that spends its winter in Michoacán and in our strawberry fields. Another example for the more experimental practices. So our baseline, as I was saying, showed that our farmers were mixing the fertile top layer with drier earth. So we launched a pilot to demonstrate that by adopting low-till practices, farmers could actually preserve their soils and therefore increase their yields. And in terms of biodiversity, this means that soils are protected, they become better carbon sinks, and have more active microbiological lives. And the next slide, please. So we implemented 5 different pilots with the aim, with the aim of first of all documenting cost and benefits of practices, validating regenerative agriculture framework, and showing farmers the practices applied in the field. So we did that in an experimental plot. We did 4 of such pilots, and here are 3 examples. The first one is using cover crops to protect soils from erosion and add nourishment to the ground. So this, we wanted to try it out because we wanted to check that it was not going to attract unwanted pests, for example. We also tried a pilot with a motoculture, so a very tiny version of a tractor, which also protects the soil from erosion and avoids soil compaction because it's a lot lighter than a tractor. So here we wanted to check if this was actually easy to use and would actually do the work that we needed from it. And a third example of a pilot is decision-making technology. So using digital tools to decrease pesticide application and water usage. And here we wanted to check that the cost of this tool actually outweighed the benefits actually outweighed the costs. In the next, please. So all of this knowledge, gave our biodiversity action plan that was centralized in one document with all the what farmers should be doing, recommendations for the farmer on different practices. And in the next slide, please. This toolkit, as well as others, are being shared internally with other projects on strawberry and other fruits inside of Danone. And that way we're leveraging the internal experience that we created with the help of the GIZ on the Madre Terra project to facilitate other Danone projects' own implementation of these tools. That's it for me. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thanks you, Louise. I'm particularly happy for your speech because it demonstrates the application of the combination of finance and biodiversity. And I like very much too the way you are focusing on soil and watershed. And I had the chance to visit the forest for butterfly and to consider the importance of water, forest, cultivation, considering the watershed in Mexico. Then thank you very much. The direct application of your example is very strong and important for us. And now we will go over to Ashok PNA. He is a professional with more than 25 years of experience and also postgraduate degree in agricultural science from GB Pant University of Agriculture and Technology. And prior to joining AVT McCormick, Ashok has worked in multiple domains in agriculture sector, including hybrid seed production and cereals, oilseeds, fruits, vegetables, processing and export of vegetables. That's very important. And agri information services. And currently, he is the head of sustainable agriculture operations at AVT McCormick. And in his presentation, he will tell us more about the story of McCormick applying for biodiversity action plan and the monitoring tool and for the red paper program in India. Ashok, for you now.
Thank you very much, Claude.
Sure.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Claude. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants and the audience on the webinar. I'm Ashok Nair. I work with AVT McCormick. Before I get into what we do at AVT McCormick in terms of sustainability and the various work that we do on biodiversity, let me give you a very brief update on what AVT McCormick is and who we are. So AVT McCormick is basically one of the longest and steadfast joint venture companies in India, which has been established in '94 between AV Thomas Group of companies in India and McCormick of the US. And we work with farmers across various states in India on 10 major spice crops, of which red pepper, or chilies as it is known in other parts of the world, is a very important crop. Now, for ABT McCormick, sustainability has been one of the core components of the organization from the very beginning, and we have been looking into sustainability and the various components of sustainability right from 1997 when we started our red pepper programs. However, without really dwelling into what sustainability is all about, I would just like to take the audience through the various things that we do under sustainability, of which biodiversity management is one of the core components. Unfortunately, I do not have a slide pack today which I could present owing to certain reasons. However, let me try to take you through what we do at ABT McCormick and how we have been able to work with GIZ and with UEBT and GNF in the biodiversity action plans that we adhere to, as well as the usage of the biodiversity monitoring tool that has been co-developed by GIZ, UEBT, and GNF. So without further ado, I would just like to mention that while most of us are aware of the core components of sustainability, there are many who think that sustainability and biodiversity are two sides of the same coin. There are schools of thought which say that sustainability is a larger umbrella, while others say that biodiversity is a larger umbrella. However, just to bring you up to speed, just like to say that while integrated pest management is one of the key focus areas for us being an exporter of spices and value-added spices, we also look at biodiversity management with equal importance. This is besides the various other large components or important components of sustainability, such as conservation of natural resources or waste management or energy management, and also social and human capital, as well as local economics, where we look at teaching the farmers how to reduce their cost of cultivation. And besides the fact that we give a lot of importance on traceability, on documentation, and of course training. Now, let me try to explain how important biodiversity is to ABT McCormick. So right from the program that we started in red peppers way back in 1997, we've been looking at having the various components of biodiversity in place. At that point in time, we did not have a biodiversity action plan in place. However, we were following the aspects of biodiversity such as crop rotation, green manuring, establishment of buffer zones, having border crops and trap crops within the red pepper programs, having and promoting beneficial predatory insects, which basically scavenge on the harmful insect pests that are on the crop. We have been setting up apiaries along with the farmers to promote bee populations and improve the pollinations. We also look at germplasm conservation by way of promoting indigenous varieties and also helping the farmers grow their own seeds for their own cultivation. This is besides afforestation, which we have been promoting at a very large scale, year on year, season after season, where each farmer has been told or is advised to grow one tree per season. And we are talking about thousands of farmers. So this has led to a considerable area under, let's say, forest. I wouldn't say forest, but definitely under tree coverage in the various regions where we have our programs. Now, last year, what we could do with the help of GIZ and UEBT and the GNF was to look at the biodiversity monitoring tool that they had co-developed. So they had taken us, the ABT McCormick team, through the biodiversity monitoring tool. Let me call it a BDMT in short for easier understanding. So with the BDMT, we have been able to basically capture some data points, and we have put those raw data points into the tool this year. We were to do it last year, however, with the global pandemic and the COVID situation going really out of hand last year, and the case is even the same today, we were not able to get those data points covered last year. However, we have been able to do it this year. And what we have seen is that through the BDNT, we have been able to put across those data points into the tool, and with the help of GIS availability, now we are in the process of assessing the various data points that we have captured. Now, what we have seen is that initially, or the preliminary data leads to us getting to know the quantity of water that we have saved in our program areas. And let me also tell the audience here that the programs that we are talking about, be it for red pepper or some other spice stock that we deal with, are sustainably certified. So the red pepper program that we are talking about currently is certified under the Rainforest Alliance, and biodiversity, as we all know, is an important component of that particular certification. So, as I said, we have been able to assess the kind of volumes of water that we have been able to save through adoption of drip irrigation methods, through the adoption of drip irrigation compared to flood irrigation, which leads to almost 500 million liters of water being saved across the program in a single season. The quantity of pesticides that we have been able to reduce by reducing the number of pesticide sprays, rather than having X number of sprays per crop, we have been able to bring it down to almost 0.65x, so almost a 35% reduction in the number of sprays. This has led to lesser contamination of the soils, lesser contamination to the environment, lesser contamination to the water and aquatic life, and also to the pollinators. What we have also been able to assess is the quantity of pesticides in terms of kilos or liters that we have been able to save on and not actually apply onto the soil. So what we are looking at is substantial savings in the natural resources, basically conserving these natural resources. And what we have also been able to assess is that we have been able to almost save 200,000 liters per acre by just adopting drip irrigation compared to flood irrigation, which many farmers still practice today. What we have also been able to do is assess the quantity of waste that has been collected through the programs that we run, in terms of the plastic waste, in terms of the metal waste, as in terms of the containers or the cardboards or the packaging. And the best part is that we have gone the full loop, as in getting this waste to get recycled. So till a few years back, we were stopping it at collection or aggregation, collection and disposal of the waste, but now we've gone one step further, and now we are ensuring the recycling of the waste, whether it is plastic waste, whether it's cardboard waste, whether it is glass waste. And that is something which has helped us, close the loop in terms of a circular economy. That's something that we're very proud of doing, and that's something that we are replicating in the various programs that we have. And as I mentioned a while ago, the afforestation programs with the various farmers that we have continues. Every farmer, regardless of the crop, the spice crop that he's working with AVT McCormick on, is aware of the fact that better forestation or planting of trees is only going to benefit the planet on a much larger scale. So we intend to leave a very positive, a very healthy carbon footprint behind. We're looking at carbon sequestration models, whereby we would be able to assess the kind of carbon footprint that we would be able to capture. And by the usage of the BDNT, what we have been able to do is start with the baseline assessment and also set the goals and targets. So we have a 4-year window ahead of us where we are going to be capturing the data, where we are going to be monitoring the data and assessing as to how we have been keeping up with the various measures that we had in place. And finally, we have been in a position to start working out on several work plans that we would have in the various crops that we deal with, the various spice crops that we deal with, so that we would have a right set of monitoring and evaluation data in place by the time we are in a position to carry out or execute or implement the DVT across the various programs that we have. And I would just like to end that. I'd just like to end by saying that while this is in place in the red pepper programs, we are also looking at replicating the same with 4 other spice programs with the help of GIZ and setting up sustainable supply chains for those particular spice crops. Thank you very much for your attention, and back to you, Claude.
Thank you very much, Ashok. And the link between paper and trees are very, very strong because of the going way for paper to climb. And now we will go over to our last speaker of today, Ambar Espaya, and she is an environmental manager at EcoRed, a non-profit organization that connects the private sector of the Dominican Republic with projects in support of sustainable development. And Ambar will tell us more about the success story of how EcoRed is consolidating the use of biodiversity check tool for the private sector in the Dominican Republic. The floor is yours, Ambar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone, or good afternoon. I am Ambar Espayat. I work as the environmental coordinator of EcoRed, and part of my work is to lead the initiatives related to biodiversity. It's a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to talk about EcoRed's work on the integration of biodiversity into the business management of private companies through biodiversity check tools. Next slide, please. Well, for those who have not heard of this institution, EcoRed is a business network that promotes principles of corporate social responsibility and a culture focused on sustainable development. Currently, the network has more than 95 private companies from a wide variety of sectors, including mining and cement companies, as well as banks, multinationals, manufacturers, even small businesses like stores, among others. We provide support to these companies in aspects related to corporate social responsibility, also environmental management and sustainability. And we participate in projects about different topics related to solid waste management, circular economy, and climate change. These projects have a national and regional scope through collaboration with international programs, institutions, and even business networks from other countries. Next, please. So in order to promote the integration of biodiversity within the management of our member companies, we started a collaboration with the Business and Biodiversity in Central America and Dominican Republic program with the goal of designing the biodiversity check tool for industries. At that point, there were 2 different biodiversity check tools. One for tourism, used mainly in hotels or travel agencies, and the other tool was used in the agricultural sector, specifically in pineapple, banana, and sugarcane plantations. So both had been used with success in different countries like Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Guatemala, or Honduras. And these tools are designed for a specific economic sector. So after the popular use of biodiversity check in tourism and agriculture, we proposed a project to obtain a tool for industries based on the member companies of EcoRed. However, when we were evaluating the great differences that exist between our member companies, we decided to design 2 different tools. Next, please. Well, the first tool we worked on is Biodiversity Check Industry tool, This one is intended for manufacturing industries, cement and mining companies, as well as food processing industries. And after designing this tool, we had a training for consultants to be able to use the tool correctly. And as part of that training, we carried out the first pilot application in the Dominican Mining Corporation. Next, please. The second tool is Biodiversity Check for service companies. This tool was a joint work with the Business Alliance for Development in Costa Rica. It was adjusted considering the characteristics of service companies. It's a very flexible tool, so it can be used for banks, trading companies, and telecommunication companies, and even shops or small businesses. All biodiversity check tools have the same goal and a similar application process following the 7 steps presented earlier in this session. Next, please. So the adjustment of these 2 tools was carried out during the first stage of joint work with Business and Biodiversity in Central America and Dominican Republic program. This began in November 2018 with the idea of having tools that can be implemented in different member companies of EcoRed. After finishing the adjustment of the tools, we carried out pilot applications in 4 companies, 2 for each tool. Then we had a launch event after we finished the pilot applications. We held a launch event in which participated representatives of most of our member companies. And there they were able to learn about the work that we have done with the tools and the experience that the first companies using the tools have. And with this event, we finished the first stage in July 2019. Next, please. So with the intention of continuing the work of integrating biodiversity in the management of companies, we are currently working on the second stage along with the Business and Biodiversity program. And the goal is to consolidate the use of biodiversity check tools by EcoRed. So we held training sessions for EcoRed staff to create the capabilities of using the tools. We have designed an awareness workshop on the importance of biodiversity and the role of the private sector in its conservation. This has been a key point throughout the work we carried out because there are some industries that, depending on the sector, can easily recognize the impact that they have on biodiversity, while other companies sometimes don't have that very clear. Like, for example, in our experience, a cement or mining company is usually concerned about properly managing biodiversity because they know that their activities generate direct impacts. While in the case of service companies, such as a bank or a small consulting office, sometimes they think that their business has nothing to do with biodiversity. So a big part of our work has been educating companies in this regard, so they understand that even being just a small office, they still consume water, they use energy, they have a chain of suppliers that use natural resources, even if not directly. So their activities do generate impact of some kind, and then they can improve in that area. We also have been holding follow-up meetings with the companies that applied the tools in the first stage to see how they have carried out the measures of their biodiversity action plans and to evaluate their progress, their challenges they had, and how we can still support them. Please. We are currently working on the implementation of biodiversity check tools in 8 of EcoRed company members. We also work on the design of informative content on the importance of biodiversity and the role of the private sector in its conservation to be displayed in our website. This with the idea of continuing education on the issue of biodiversity and also to inform companies that want to be part of this initiative. Likewise, we are planning our internal strategy to formalize the incorporation of biodiversity check tools as a service to all of our member companies. Next, please. We will be publishing the new landing page on our website about biodiversity and business. We also continue to provide support to the companies that are implementing biodiversity action plans, and we seek to continue expanding the use of biodiversity check tools for integration of biodiversity into business management in more of our member companies. And we're also looking forward to keep sharing information about our progress and lessons learned during the process. So, next slide. That is all I have to share with you today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you to you. Very nice presentation. As you, I agree that awareness is a lead by training and the consciousness of people. It is at the heart of any change, any move concerning biodiversity and people. And Bianca, perhaps we will have some questions. 1, 2, 3. We have some minutes. Bianca?
Yeah, we have very limited time, but we'll try to take at least a couple of questions from the chat box, if I may. So I think starting from the start, from the beginning, I just got a question here to either Simona or Tobias regarding which countries BAPs are adopted, the biodiversity action plans are adopted at the moment.
Yes, thanks for the question, Tobias. Shall I start with what UBT does, and then you can also share your experience? So for us, we have some countries in Africa, so Egypt, for instance, or Nigeria, but also some countries in Latin America, so namely Argentina, that I remember of, and we have also we cover North America with the United States and some other plan in the Balkan area. So yeah, this more or less, I cannot list them all, but more or less this is.
But it's nice to know that there is a variety of locations, biomes, so interesting to see that it works in different environments. Thank you very much. Just following again on the question, and I think now maybe if Tobias could step up to help us. Someone mentioned that they learned a lot about integrating biodiversity into business strategies. And they also noted the need for relevant tools such as the biodiversity action plans and the monitoring scheme that was built up, but also about the need to scale those up. So he would like to know if there are plans to increase awareness on these new biodiversity business strategies to ensure sustainability. How do you see, communication strategies to scale up the use of those tools to help other companies also to receive the knowledge and to implement those?
Okay, yeah, thanks for this question. Now, companies applying these tools, they do communicate their efforts. That's all about it. You implement, you use the tools because you want to communicate something. And I have to say that there is companies aligning frequently. Simona mentioned the Food for Biodiversity initiative, and there is communication of biodiversity management a major part of it. So you find communication everywhere.
And just a follow up quickly, how do you see NGOs, the role of the NGOs in supporting those efforts?
Right at the front line. See, Global Nature Fund is an NGO, and we have been quite busy in supporting all the developments you've heard about today, always somehow in the background, but then again, thinking about new ways to actually benefit biodiversity. And the alignment, the collaboration between companies and NGO is quite successful and was always quite successful. So this is a good way to go.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think just in complementing your answer, I think the task and the challenge to curb biodiversity loss in front of us is so huge. There is no way the private sector alone can undertake all the work that needs to be done. So the collaboration with NGOs, with government, establishing partnerships, implementing those tools, the private sector, of course, to test piloting, to communicating the results, to use all these tools that are available right now. These are going to be extremely important moving forward if we want to make progress at large. Thank you so much. And I think just to conclude in the questions that we received, I think that one is to Svenja. Regarding biodiversity checks, have you also worked on implementation costs and implementation with private sector, and how financial resources are distributed? I hope Svenja is still with us.
I was about to leave just now, but I heard
very last one.
I heard your question. Yes. First of all, what we did, we designed the tool the way that it is very that it is not very expensive. Yeah, we have consultants we have given capacitation to consultants in all the countries here in the region, and we are trying to anchor the biodiversity check within NGO and sector networks. So it was very nice that we could hear Amber just in the last presentation, because with their own personnel today, they provide biodiversity checks to their member base. So when we talk about NGOs, we also talk about private sector networks, and EcoRed, together with all the other networks in the region, they have more than 1,000 members, and with their own resources and with their own staff within their membership fee, they are providing the implementation of the biodiversity check today. We calculate that a biodiversity check, if you do it locally, will cost not more than $2,000. And if you do it in a group, we have also a modality for groups. It's going to be even less expensive. And more, we are also trying to involve the enterprise. It's not good that GIZ is paying for all these biodiversity checks, because this is not sustainable. So we are developing a cost model so that even with member fees or with adjusted fees for enterprises, they will be able also to pay for that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And with that, I hand it over to Claude for the closing.
Okay. Once again, thank you to all, and especially for the speakers. And ich habe gern auch Mauricio, le GIZ zu bedanken, weil es war für mich so wichtig, Zeit zusammen, und noch vielen Dank für alle. And I thank everyone, and I thought that the meeting and the time being was very interesting. Thank you to all, and please go ahead with biodiversity and the link between business, biodiversity, and people worldwide. Thank you very much. And Bianca, you are always perfect. Thank you very much to you too.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Have a nice one.
Thank you very much.
Vielen
Dank. Muchas gracias.
Bye. Bye. Dankeschön.